being multiracial is very important to me personally, because it's, especially here at college, I am very much figuring out my identity, especially race, with the election and just life here at campus, and people asking me, where are you from? And my answer not being enough. Like, I'll say, oh, I'm from Minnesota, but then it's like, oh no, where are you really from? And that's always like annoying as hell.
I had not really explored my identity as a mixed race individual at all very much prior to coming to Tufts.
It wasn't like race was ever talked about with me. So coming to Tufts, people bringing up POC and language that I'd never heard of, and I was like, okay, this is too much. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what this white privilege is. And then realizing where I am in this system of POC and white, and kind of being in the middle of that, and both at the same time, is really complicated.
My dad is moved to the US when he was 25 and has been there ever since, but like he is very much Indian, grew up in India, like identifies as Indian, is now back living in India and like working as an Indian. So, well, actually he has a US citizenship now, and that was just like a strategic like safety move on our part after 9/11. But so yeah, it was just a lot more about my dad is Indian and my mom is white American, or like even American. I don't know if I wouldn't have even said like white American then.
My mom always really stressed that we were Filipino. I have a really big family on my mom's side. I have like 30 cousins, and we all would get together maybe like once a year for like a big family reunion, and that was definitely the time I felt most like myself. So it wasn't something that I really worried about in my family. But outside of those like large family gatherings, it was definitely lonely. I didn't have the words to describe how I felt as a child, but I knew I was different.
Growing up in a fairly predominant white town, I was always sort of like known as, oh, one of like the 3 Asian kids in the entire grade.
People would always tell me who I was. No one ever asked.
I like grew up very white, like ate a lot of Trader Joe's food and listened to a lot of Coldplay. Yeah, so that's like a huge part of me, and it's hard. It's like I always feel uncomfortable in Indian spaces just because I'm so aware of how white I grew up.
In my family, I would say we didn't really ever talk about race. My mom, she is Asian, she's Chinese, full Chinese, and she has called me out that I think about race too much, or that I'm overreacting, and that's been pretty painful.
I was maybe not blatantly ashamed of my identity, but I almost, I guess, didn't want to associate with that Asian American part of me. Growing up, I think, as much as I love my mother, she unintentionally sort of made me want to distance myself from my Asian identity in some respects, because she would constantly say things, she would consistently say things like, oh, Chinese people are so rude, or Chinese people are so loud.
My dad, he's white and doesn't really think the topic of race is important. I'm seen as the liberal daughter, the liberal sister that goes to Tufts University. And so I've been in this bubble of Tufts and trying to figure out what my identity is and where I fit for a couple of years, and me being a POC and what that means, whereas he hasn't had those conversations, and he's grown up in a white town and lives in a white town now.
I remember this specific moment. My friends and I were sitting at the cafeteria, and they were joking around, and they were making fun of accents. They like started doing this accent that I didn't get, and they were like, it's your mom's accent. And I was just like, what are you talking about? My mom doesn't have an accent. And they were like, yeah, she does. I can't even understand her sometimes. And I just got so pissed off that I left. I went home and I told my dad, and my dad was like, yeah, your mom has an accent. And that was a big moment for me. This was 10th grade, and it's when I realized that I wasn't just Asian, I was like different.
She would make comments sort of insinuating the negatives, her perceived negatives of Asian America, which I think is just a manifestation of her internalized depression, and as a result, I sort of started to build up my own internalized depression.
You can't just not talk about race because that's not okay. We're not colorblind. We do experience the world very differently based on how we look and how we're socialized. We don't have like multiracial people to look up to that I'm close to that are adults, and that's weird. But that's just how my life is for now.
There's these differences in like when we go to see the Indian relatives, like my mom's not always that happy because she can't really understand what they're saying, like understandably, but also that she like kind of gets tired of like the different cultural norms that like she's supposed to like present when we visit our Indian relatives. And vice versa, like we have like a family reunion with my mom's huge like Irish Catholic family like every summer, and my dad hates it, like he's very uncomfortable. He hangs out with like the one Mexican who married into the family, and they like go out and drink beers together. So it's like very much like there is like a huge divide, and so I grew up like, yeah, always navigating those different extended families and the way my parents reacted to those extended families too.
I love buying cards for people, like birthday cards, Valentine's Day cards, or whatever have you. And I was just looking at all these cards and I just realized, wow, none of these people are Asian or black or anything. They're all white and none of them look like me. And that was really painful for me. And coming to terms with what white privilege is and how I receive some of the benefits. Yes, I do have benefits because of my lighter skin tone, but that doesn't mean that I'm like any less POC than the next person.
It's interesting being half white, half Asian, because I used to sort of describe it as you have your foot in both doors, like being white and being Asian, and for that reason you can kind of understand what it's like to be both. Now I think that's not completely accurate. The reason being because even if you are quote unquote biologically half white and half Asian, it doesn't really mean that you fall somewhere in the middle of being a POC. If you're not white, you're not white. If you are half not white, you're not white.
Just because I am partially white doesn't make me any less POC because I don't look white, and my experience of the world is not that of a white person, and so that's kind of something I've had to come to terms with and thinking, am I really POC? Can I claim that?
I thought I had it figured out. I was like, I'm Asian and white. End of story. That was easy. That only took me 2 years to figure out. But coming here, I was faced with like so many more questions. It definitely got harder to just be myself. Like the questions people ask you every day, like what are you, like do you belong here? And it may not be worded exactly like that, but they're all some forms of those questions.
I definitely have felt my racial location oppressively now here at Tufts, and just how white it is, and seeing that I am the only POC in some of my classes, or that I just have a bunch of white friends, which I don't think is a bad thing, but it's just how the makeup of the school is, and I'm trying to figure out how I can surround myself with people that look like me and understand what I'm saying when I talk about race, and that's been really hard.
I am, I guess, second generation Indian American. But my connection to Indianness isn't domestic at all. Like, my connection to India is like in India, because we lived there when I was 12. We moved there for a year, and like I just went to school as an Indian girl, and like really shaped a lot of who I am. And like my subsequent, like my whole family is still in India, so it's not like I had a huge Indian American community or like even went to a lot of like temples. So I don't feel really Indian American, I feel like Indian, kind of.
As a person of color and as a queer person of color, you sort of spend your life being rejected by white straight people. That doesn't always have to manifest in that, oh no, you can't sit with us. It's not always that blatant. It's more just feeling like there's something different about you and these people. You can't quite relate to them. I had a lot of social anxiety, felt like I didn't fit in, like I wanted so desperately to fit in oftentimes, but I just didn't fit in. Perhaps the most revelatory thing that happened to me this semester was I finally, after years and years and years throughout middle school and high school and even my first 2 years of college, I finally stopped blaming myself for having felt different and feeling like I didn't fit in. And it took me finding community and finding people like me in order to recognize that, because there weren't people like me in my high school. There weren't people, I didn't have this community in high school. And so when I was finally able to stop blaming myself for that and sort of switch the tables and be like, wait, that wasn't my fault that I didn't want to join the lacrosse team. I didn't fail where I came from. Where I came from failed me.
When people say Asian American, they have a specific image in mind, and I have a specific image in my mind, and I've been trying to like question that image. Like, why do I picture this one type of person, or maybe like a couple type of people, and not myself?
One of the things that I grapple with the most being Asian American, being mixed race Asian American, is this sort of sense of, am I Asian enough? I don't think I'm Asian enough. You know, like, I don't speak Chinese very well, even though I've been studying it for a little while. And to a lot of people, I look optically white.
Being Asian American can look like anything, especially for mixed race people. And that's something that I think is really great about being mixed race, that it's taught me that there isn't just one definition for a type of person. It actually has taught me that there is no definition for a type of person, specifically an Asian American, and that's something that I think whether you're mixed or not, you could gain something from that lesson, because it's helped me feel like enough. That's another thing that I think a lot of mixed people feel. They feel like they're not enough.
I'm very aware of always having some part of me not addressed. I spent the summer in India and just realizing a lot of the things that were stifled. A lot of the stuff that I should be really proud of, or I should be really engaged with, that I was never encouraged to be engaged with at a young age.
I think that these sort of attempts to measure your level of Asian authenticity can be really toxic and a really bad thing.
I think we do a really great job of invalidating ourselves. We can talk about our experiences, we can even think of the times when people have specifically hurt us because of our race, and then we'll be like, but I'm mixed white, so it doesn't really count.
You almost feel that you are not worthy of your Asian American identity, that you cannot claim this identity because you do not look full Asian American. You almost feel you almost feel invalidated every time someone says, oh, well, I would have never guessed that you were part Asian. It makes you feel like you cannot claim this identity.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to anybody who's multiracial out there, that you matter, and it is hard being biracial, triracial, however many things you have in you, but it's okay to be who you are.